I'm Jeffrey Cohan. I'm the Executive Director of Jewish Vegetarians of North America. Yeah, thank you. It sort of is you gather from the name, it is our mission to help and persuade Jews to adopt plant-based diets, and that does mean a vegan diet. So, and we do that for two reasons. One, because, well, there's lots of great organizations that are represented at this conference doing veg advocacy work. They cannot get the message before religious audiences, into synagogues, Jewish student groups, Jewish newspapers, on and on. We do that, but besides that, as Lisa just told us, the Bible, or what we call the Torah, actually does establish a plant-based diet as the ideal, and cast the eating of meat in a very negative light. So, because Lisa did such a great job on that issue, I'm going to put those issues aside for now and talk about the vitally important issue we're all here to discuss today, which is the relationship between the AR community and religious communities. This is really a critical issue, and I commend you for being here, not because I'm on the panel in spite of that, but because this issue is of critical importance to our movement. I'm seeing heads nodding, so I don't think I need to belabor the point too much. But I just want to say that every successful social movement in our nation's history has had the active engagement of broad swaths of the religious community. And if we're ever going to get where we need to go, we cannot be the exception. So I actually had several other bullet points on that point, but I think it would be superfluous for me to go into detail since we're all in agreement about that. So where do we stand? What is the relationship between the animal rights community and religious communities in this country? I actually gave an hour-long talk on this subject at Vegetarian Summerfest last week in Pennsylvania. As I was beginning my talk, I saw a guy I knew in the audience. His name is Joe. He's a graduate student at a theological seminary, a Presbyterian seminary. He's about to get his ordination. And I had actually originally met him at a previous AR conference. So I said to this guy, Joe, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the relationship between the AR community and religious communities being we're all singing Kumbaya, we're in perfect sync, and 1 being we're not even really talking to each other, how would you rate the relationship? And he looked at me and said, on a scale of 1 to 10, 0. And actually, it's probably a pretty accurate gauge. Maybe a little bit better in the Jewish community than the Christian community, but we have a lot of work to do. So how did we get into this mess? And I think if we're going to solve the problem, we need to know how we got into this fix in the first place. So I just want to give you a few ideas of why I think we're in this predicament. The first is that, and this is really in no particular order, anyone who's had the benefit of hearing Lisa's presentation would not have this problem, but there's a fundamental misreading of the Bible going on in both churches and synagogues. And what I'm talking about, Genesis 9 is a perfect example. Yeah, it does say in Genesis 9 that we have permission to eat meat, but if you actually look at it in its context, meat eating is cast in about the most negative possible light you can imagine. Furthermore, the dominion verse is probably the one most cited by meat eaters as biblical justification for eating meat, and we all know that's insane because it's part of the exact same conversation in the Bible where God tells us to eat the plants and only the plants. So among rabbis, I can tell you, whether they're meat eaters or vegetarians, there's no dispute that dominion does not give us the right to kill animals for food. But even people, I rarely quote George Will, the conservative political columnist, but he said something that was very astute, which is, many people go to church, but few understand. And when it comes to these issues, unfortunately, that's the case. The second reason is, who's here saw the film Cowspiracy, which I think was screened here? A lot of people, great film. They could have made the exact same film about clergy. And instead of showing charts about how livestock contributes to greenhouse gas emissions, they could have shown biblical verses and made these clergy people look foolish. And the reason that many clergy do not advocate and tell you the same thing Lisa and I are telling you is for the same reason, actually, these environmental leaders are completely ignoring the effect of animal agriculture on the environment. Because, like environmental organizations, churches and synagogues are membership organizations. And generally speaking, they don't want to challenge their members to change their behavior or say anything to them that's going to make them feel uncomfortable. It's a generalization here, but I think that has a lot to do with the fact that you don't see more rabbis, priests, and ministers telling you what Lisa and I are. It's also, unfortunately, just part of the culture, and it cuts across the Jewish religion and the Christian community. In the Jewish religion, brisket, gefilte fish. It's become part of the culture in Judaism. In Christianity, your Friday fish fries. In Catholic churches. So we have that working against us as well. And the last thing is this. If the Bible, as we now know, really does establish a vegan diet as the ideal, why aren't all rabbis and all ministers espousing veganism? I think the number one reason is they are people too. And like all of us and everybody in this country, they are bombarded every day with pro-meat messages. In the media, in the workplaces, in the schools, sometimes even in their homes. And while everyone in this room, I congratulate you, you've been able to overcome that. Most people obviously haven't, and that is true of priests, rabbis, ministers, and all forms of clergy too. So that's the religion side. But the AR community deserves some of the blame too for this predicament, if we're really going to be honest with ourselves. And part of the reason why the AR, or part of what's causing the AR community to be estranged from religious communities, and part of what is causing the hostility that is found in some circles at this conference toward religion, is that there is also the same fundamental misreading of the Bible. If people going to church and synagogues don't get it, you can bet people who are hostile to religion are also likely to misinterpret Genesis 1:26, the dominion verse. And that does happen. So religion often gets blamed for the terrible plight of the animals when at least you really can't blame the text for that, because dominion doesn't give us the right to kill animals for food. And the second problem is simply one of demographics, because overwhelmingly at this conference and in the AR movement in general, what you see is that's primarily, not exclusively, but generally made up of younger, progressive people, educated people, and that is exactly the demographic group that is least likely to be religious in this country. So just by virtue of pure demographics, there is somewhat of a divide between the AR community and the religious community. So what do we do about this? I really think we have to, it's really on us, as Lisa suggested, to fix the problem, because if we're going to wait for synagogues and churches to come around, we're going to be waiting a very long time. The part of the solution lies with organizations like ours and the Christian Vegetarian Association that are actually trying actively to fix this problem and bridge the divide. So it might be a little self-serving for me to say that, but I sincerely mean that. So let's hope that these organizations become stronger and develop more and more capacity so they can heal this fracture between the AR movement and religious communities. The second thing is, the way I usually put it is, if rabbis aren't going to do their job, we need to do it for them. And a Christian friend of mine who was on a panel with me similar to this at Vegetarian Summerfest put it in a way, a more Christian way, which is, it may just be that we as lay people actually got the calling from God to do this work when our priests, our ministers, our rabbis, our clergy did not. And if that's our calling, we need to run with it. So whichever formulation works for you, it's really the same idea expressed two different ways. So how do we do it real quickly? What can all of you do to help fix this problem and get religious communities on board with this movement. The only limit is your creativity. There's all sorts of things you can do to get this message in front of your particular house of worship or people from your religion in your community. One obvious way is use the media. For instance, and just to give you one example, I write a blog, which some of you might know about, called the Beet-Eating Heeb, which is about the theology of veganism. And I have my own website on WordPress, but in addition, the blog is actually on the homepage of the Jewish newspaper in my hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So anytime anybody logs on to the homepage of the Jewish newspaper in Pittsburgh, they're seeing anti-meat, pro-vegan messaging right there on the homepage. So don't be bashful about writing articles, letters to the editor, blogs, any way you can get into religious media. They're always looking for content because they're always understaffed. You can arrange a lecture or bring a speaker into your house of worship. You can host an adult education class, a vegan potluck. One quick story that might inspire you. My daughter was going through confirmation when she was 16, and there was going to be a dinner. So I said, I took us on that dinner committee just to make sure there's one vegan entree. So I emailed the chair of the committee and said, all I really care about is that there's a solid vegan entree. She got back to me and said, you're vegan? Exclamation mark, I am too. We ended up doing a vegan dinner for the confirmation dinner, and it was the best food anybody had ever had at our synagogue. So wherever you feel comfortable with and wherever your creativity lies, there's no end to the ways you can get the vegan message and the true word of the Bible and the Torah before religious audiences in your community. Thank you.